They say you can tell a man's story by the dust on his boots. Mine? It's the kind that's walked through more miles than most people ever dream of. Blistered through cattle trails, construction sites, oil fields, and courtroom hallways. And yet, most days, when I pull into a gas station with my beat-up red Ford pickup, folks don't see any of that. They see the hat, the silence, the grit. And they assume I'm a drifter, a loner, some cowboy wasting time between nowhere and nothing. That's exactly what she thought too. But let me take you back, not to the part where she showed up in my life like a lightning bolt splitting a calm sky. No, that comes later. First, you need to know who I was before the money, before the ranches and skyscrapers, before I ever learned what love could cost a man. I was 17 when I left home. My old man drank himself to death, and my mama worked herself to the bone trying to keep the lights on. We had nothing but dust and dignity. When I left, I carried only two things: a second-hand guitar and a toolbox I'd earned fixing fences for the neighbors. No plan, no backup, just raw determination. I picked up odd jobs, wherever I could: dishwashing, welding, roofing. Learned quick, listened more. I'd sleep in my truck, shower at gas stations, eat beans cold out of a can. People talk about the grind like it's some kind of motivational mantra. Let me tell you, the grind isn't glamorous. It's survival, with no applause. But what kept me going was a vision no one else could see. I still remember the day I first laid eyes on oil. Not metaphorically. I mean real thick black Texas crude bubbling up out of the ground on a forgotten piece of land I was hauling scrap across. The old rancher who owned it was talking about selling. Said he was done fighting drought and debt. I didn't have the money, but I had a mouth. And I'd learned that if you speak like a man with nothing to lose, you'd be surprised how far you can get. I brokered a deal, scraped together what I could, borrowed the rest from a mechanic. I'd once helped out of a legal mess. And somehow, by grit and God's grace, I became the owner of 40 acres of dry land. And what turned out to be a multi-million-dollar well underneath it. That was the first break. But don't mistake a break for a blessing. It's what you do after that determines if you're just lucky or if you're built for more. I didn't buy fast cars or pop champagne. I reinvested every dime, bought machinery, hired a geologist, learned everything I could about oil leases, land rights, and market cycles. I became obsessed. Where others saw a cowboy, I became a CEO, not in a corner office, but behind the wheel of my truck, signing deals in diners and backwoods porches. Inside 5 years, I went from sleeping in my truck to owning the land I used to get kicked off of. But the thing no one tells you about success, real, soul-stripping success, is that it doesn't fill the holes inside you. It just builds higher walls around them, and that brings us to her. It was a Tuesday, hot as hell. I'd pulled into this small town to check on a land parcel I was thinking of buying. Got out of my truck, boots dusty, hat low, and walked into a diner for coffee. She was behind the counter, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, eyes full of stories I hadn't heard yet. She looked at me like I was trouble. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. Her name was Lacey. A single mum, working 2 jobs, trying to keep her brother out of jail and her own dreams alive. She didn't know who I was, didn't care. She just saw another dusty cowboy walking in for caffeine and maybe something more. And for the first time in years, I didn't want to talk business. I wanted to know her story. I asked her about her life, and she laughed, said, "You sure? You want to hear about broken dreams and busted brakes?" I told her. "That's my native language." She smiled. I didn't know then that she'd change everything. Over the next few weeks, I kept coming back. Kept finding reasons to check. The land, though it didn't take long to buy it. Truth was, I wanted to be near her. There was something about the way she stood tall even when life tried to knock her down. She had fire. And I hadn't felt warmth like that in a long, long time. Still, I didn't tell her who I was. Didn't tell her I owned more land than anyone, in 3 counties, or that I had oil flowing from 5 wells across the state. I just let her think I was some cowboy passing through, because maybe. I was afraid that once she knew the truth, she'd see the man behind the money, and not the boy who'd walked away from a broken home with dust on his boots. You see, when you've built an empire from nothing, people start to treat you different. They see the success, not the scars. They want the shine, not the story. But Lacey, she looked at me like a man. Not a billionaire, not a deal maker, not a ghost of who I used to be, and maybe that scared me more than anything. That's where it all began. Not with a deal, or a discovery, or a zero on a check. It began with a cup of black coffee in a dusty diner, and a woman who saw past the boots and into the man beneath. She thought I was just a drifter cowboy. But what she didn't know was I hadn't loved in years, and maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to. Some folks will tell you life is measured in years. I don't buy that. Life is measured in moments. And that night by the fence, under a bleeding sunset sky, became one of those moments for me. It had been weeks since I first met Lacey at that diner. Every time I stopped in town, I'd find myself parking my truck in the same dusty lot, walking through that glass door like it was some kind of sanctuary. It wasn't just the coffee, it was her. The way her eyes softened when she smiled, the stories she told without even opening her mouth. But I was still a ghost in my own life. A man with secrets stitched into the seams of every shirt I wore. That evening, the sky looked like it had been set on fire, the clouds painted in shades of orange and crimson. I was leaning against the wooden fence bordering one of my smaller properties on the edge of town, a place no one knew I owned. The land stretched out far, quiet and endless, like the dreams I used to have when I was dirt poor and desperate. Lacey showed up, driving that old Chevy of hers, the engine rattling, like a loose wagon wheel. I could hear it before I saw her. She pulled up, cut the headlights, and stepped out, kicking up a puff of dust with her worn-out boots. "I figured you'd be here," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? And what gave me away?" She smirked. "You've got a look, like a man chasing ghosts." I didn't deny it. She came over, propped herself up on the fence next to me, and for a while, we just sat there, saying nothing, watching the sun sink behind the hills, and then, like a dam breaking, she spoke. "My daddy used to bring me out here when I was a kid," she said softly. "Said this land belonged to a man no one ever saw. Some big shot who owned half the state but never showed his face. Folks called him the Phantom." I stiffened, the name hitting harder than I expected. "I thought he was just a story," she added, kicking her boot against the fence post. "But here you are, sitting where he used to." I swallowed hard, didn't say a word. She turned to me, her face barely lit by the fading light. "You running from something, cowboy?" I wanted to lie. God, I wanted to. But for the first time in years, the truth felt lighter than the weight I'd been carrying. "Running from myself," I admitted. She didn't press, didn't ask questions. She just nodded like she understood what it meant to be haunted by your own reflection. And in that moment, something shifted. We built a fire, collected dry branches, old fence posts, whatever we could find. The flames cracked and hissed, chasing away the chill that had settled in the air. We sat side by side, sharing stories we'd never told anyone else. I told her about my old man, about leaving home with nothing but calloused hands and a fire in my chest. She told me about her mama's funeral, about raising her kid brother, alone, about the nights she'd slept in her car just to keep a roof over his head. There were no pity looks, no hollow comforts, just 2 broken souls, sitting by a fire in the middle of nowhere, finding warmth in each other's company. I should have told her then. Should have said, "Lacey, I'm not who you think I am." That land your daddy talked about? It's mine. It's been mine for years. And every time you looked for the phantom, you were looking at him. But I didn't. Because for once, I wasn't a billionaire. I wasn't a tycoon or a deal maker. I was just a man. And she was just a woman. And out there, under the stars, we were equals. The night stretched on. The fire burned low. And when she finally stood to leave, she looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I don't know what you're carrying, cowboy," she said softly. "But whatever it is, it's heavy. And someday it's going to break you if you don't lay it down." Then she was gone, the taillights of her Chevy disappearing down the dirt road, and I sat there alone, watching the last embers die out, knowing she was right. I'd built an empire, owned half the state, but somewhere along the way, I'd lost. The man I used to be, and for the first time in years, I wanted him back. Life has a funny way of throwing you off course when you think you've finally got your feet under you. I'd spent years making sure no one got too close, keeping my past buried and my business dealings even deeper. In my world, trust was a currency rarer than oil, and loyalty was leased, not owned. But that night by the fire, something inside me cracked. And once a crack appears, it doesn't take much for a storm to pour in. The very next morning, a storm did roll in, both in the sky and in my life. I'd driven into town early. The sky was a thick bruise of dark clouds, the air heavy with the kind of pressure that tells you something's about to break. I didn't know if it was the weather or my own gut twisting itself in knots. I pulled up to the diner, same dusty spot, same dent in the parking lot. But something felt off. Inside, Lacey wasn't behind the counter. The old man who ran the grill, Gus, wiped his hands on a rag and nodded at me. "She's out back," he muttered. "You might want to go talk to her." I didn't ask why, just pushed through the back door, boots crunching on gravel. And there she was, standing in the alley, phone pressed to her ear, shoulders tense, face pale. She looked like a woman hearing the kind of news that shatters worlds. I stayed back, not wanting to intrude, until she hung up and turned around. The moment our eyes met, I knew something terrible had happened. "My brother," she choked out. He got himself arrested again. They're asking for bail I don't have." I stepped closer, instinct taking over. "How much?" 10,000. I could have pulled that out of my glove box. But it wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant, about pride, about the unspoken rule in small towns that debts get paid with blood, sweat, and time, not handouts from strangers. I didn't offer. "Not yet." I asked instead. "What's the plan?" She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "There is no plan, cowboy. I got nothing. No savings, no favors left to cash in. I can't lose him. He's all I've got." And in that moment, watching her fight to hold herself together, something inside me made a decision my head never signed off on. "Let me help," I said. She shook her head. "I can't owe you like that." "You don't," I told her. "Consider it an investment in someone I care about." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes flickered, that guarded look returning.
"Why, huh? Why do you care, cowboy? You barely know me. You won't even tell me your real name. Who are you, really?" And there it was. The storm I didn't see coming. I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming at me to lie, to deflect, to walk away like I always did when things got too real. But then I remembered what she said by the fire. "Someday it's gonna break you if you don't lay it down."
Maybe today was that day. "My name's Maddox Creed," I said quietly. "I'm not just some drifter cowboy. I'm the one who owns this land, the one your daddy used to call the Phantom." Her face froze. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked like she'd been punched. "You," she whispered. "You've been lying to me this whole time." I never lied, I said, hating how weak it sounded. I just didn't tell you everything. Her jaw clenched. Why? Because I liked who I was when you didn't know, I confessed. Because for the first time in years, someone looked at me and didn't see dollar signs. You saw a man, and I didn't want to lose that. For a long, heavy moment, she said nothing, just stood there, staring at me like she didn't know whether to hit me or cry. Then she turned and walked away, didn't say a word, just left. And I stood there in that alley, the storm finally breaking overhead, rain pouring down like it had. Been waiting for this moment too. That night, I didn't go back to my estate. Didn't return to the mansion with its 12 bedrooms and empty walls. I stayed in my truck, parked on that same fence line where we'd built a fire, watching the rain turn the dirt road into mud, and for the first time in a long time I felt empty. Not because she was gone, but because I'd finally let myself feel what it was like to have something real, and then watched it slip through my hands. The next morning, I went to the jail. Posted bail. Didn't leave my name, just made sure. Her brother walked free. And when I passed by the diner that evening, she wasn't there. No note, no message, just absence. And in that absence, I realized something that scared the hell out of me. I wasn't just falling for her. I'd already fallen. Some men are born with names that open doors. Some fight tooth and nail to carve a name worth remembering. And some, like me, learn too late that a name means nothing if you're the only one left to speak it. After Lacey walked away, something inside me cracked wide open. I thought I'd built my walls high enough, thick enough, strong enough to keep feelings like this out. I was wrong. The next few days felt like a war inside my own skin. Every deal I made, every signature I scrawled on million-dollar contracts felt hollow. My estate, my trucks, my land, the empire I'd bled for, all of it felt like a castle, made of sand because none of it could buy me back what I'd lost. And for the first time, I forced myself to remember the boy I used to be. I drove out to the old place, what was left of my childhood home. It was nothing but a decaying shell now. 4 crooked walls and a sagging roof, barely standing against the wind. The old oak tree my mama used to hang laundry on was still there, though most of its branches were bare. I stood there a long time, boots in the dirt, letting the ghosts come. I remembered my mama's voice, soft and fierce at the same time. "Boy," she used to say, "never let the weight of the world turn your heart to stone. You ain't built for bitterness." I had. God help me, I had. I remembered leaving this place, swearing I'd never look back, chasing wealth so no one could ever make me feel small again. And in doing so, I'd become a man no one truly knew. Was Maddox Creed, the Phantom, the Oil King, the man who owned half the state? But the boy who'd left this house barefoot and bruised. He was gone, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to find him again. I made a decision right there. I didn't want to die a rich man alone. I didn't want to be remembered as the guy with the biggest ranch and the emptiest life. I wanted to matter, and the only way to start was to fix what I'd broken, with her. I found Gus the next morning, nursing a cup of black coffee in the corner of the diner. "She quit," he grunted before I could ask. My gut twisted. "Left town?" He shook his head. "Camping up near Willow's Ridge. Said she needed air, didn't want nobody following. But if you ask me, son, if you give a damn, you'll follow anyway." I did. Willow's Ridge was a stretch of wilderness about 30 miles out. Rugged country, hills thick with trees, a river that cut through rock like a knife, and skies so big they made you feel small. It was the kind of place you went to outrun your past, or make peace with it. I packed nothing but a coat, a flask, and a bundle of firewood. Didn't take a driver, didn't bring a phone, just me, my old truck, and the weight of everything I needed to say. It took half a day to find her. She was sitting by the river, legs crossed, hair a wild mess in the wind. Face turned to the setting sun like she was daring the world to knock her down again. I didn't announce myself, just sat down a few feet away. She didn't look over, but she didn't leave either. For a while we said nothing. The water rushed by. Birds called from the trees. The sky bled colors I hadn't seen since I was a kid, and when the silence had stretched long enough, I spoke. I was 9 the first time I got beat for dreaming too big, I said quietly. I told my old man I was going to own land someday. Not just a few acres, whole counties. He laughed, told me boys like us don't get dreams like that, said it'd get me killed, wanting more than my place. She turned then. Her eyes were softer than I deserved. I left home at 17, built an empire out of spite, became a man even my own reflection didn't recognize. And then, I walked into a diner in a town I didn't need, and you sat there with your smart mouth and your kind eyes, and I remembered what it felt like to want something for no reason but the wanting. I took a breath, the hardest one of my life, and I ruined it, because I was afraid. The air between us was thick, heavy with things neither of us knew how to name. Then she spoke. I don't care about your money, Maddox. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was just true. I cared that you didn't trust me, that you thought you had to be someone else for me to see you. I swallowed the knot in my throat. I know, I said, and if I could take it back, I would. She gave a small, broken smile. But you can't, and neither can I. I reached out then, not to touch her, not yet, but to offer the only thing I had left. My real name's Maddox Creed, but the man who loves you, his name's still the boy who dreamed under that old oak tree. For the first time in days, she laughed, a soft, fragile thing. Well, she murmured, that's a start, and just like that, the storm began to pass. If someone had told me a year ago that the only thing that could break Maddox Creed wasn't a rival company, a bad deal, or even the law, but a woman with a crooked smile and a scar on her chin, I'd have laughed them out of the room. But here I was, and it wasn't funny anymore. The night after Willow's Ridge, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fire we built, watching the flames twist and snap like they were trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. Lacey hadn't promised me anything. She hadn't kissed me. She hadn't even said she'd forgive me. But she stayed. That meant more than any contract, any title deed, or any $1 million deal I'd ever made. It meant hope, and I wasn't about to waste it. A week later, a firestorm hit, not the kind you see in the sky, but the kind that blows through lives, leaving everything in ashes. Word got out. Some bitter old rival of mine, desperate to dig at my legacy, exposed the whole story to the press. Not just about Maddox Creed being the Phantom, but about Lacey, about her brother's troubles, about every private thing she'd ever told me. The papers printed her name alongside mine. The vultures circled. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry for myself. I was terrified for her. I drove like a demon to her place. Knew before I even pulled up that she wouldn't be there. Her truck was gone, the porch light off. The world was quieter than it should have been. I left my estate manager in charge of the land, threw what I could in the back of my truck, and headed for the one place I knew she'd run when the world got cruel, the old riverside. I found her there at dusk, same spot by the water. This time, she didn't look surprised to see me. You ever think, she said quietly, without looking at me, that maybe the universe keeps giving you chances to fix what you break, because it wants to see if you'll finally learn? I sat down beside her. I'm learning, Lacey. God help me, I am. She sighed, and for the first time in days, let me see the hurt behind her brave face. They called my job, she said. They printed lies about me. My brother's embarrassed, scared to leave his place. Folks in town won't look me in the eye. I clenched my fists. I'll bury whoever. She cut me off. I don't need a savior, Maddox. I need a man. Her. Words hit harder than any fist ever could. A man, not a billionaire, not a phantom, not a legend. A man. I reached for her hand, let her decide if she'd take it. She did. I can't erase the mistakes, I told her, but I can promise this. No more lies, no more walls. I want to build something real. And if it takes a lifetime to earn your trust back, I'll spend every damn day trying. She looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it. That flicker of the girl who used to dream. The one who wanted more than a diner paycheck and small-town gossip. And then, like a fire finally finding dry wood, she smiled. A small, tired, beautiful smile. Okay, she said. Just one word. But it was enough. In the weeks that followed, I made good on every promise. I pulled out of half the ruthless deals I didn't need. Donated land to build a community center in town, in her mother's name. Made sure her brother got a clean start. College classes, a job on my ranch, a way out. And me? I let the world know who Maddox Creed really was, not the phantom. Not the untouchable billionaire, just a man who'd made more mistakes than most, but damn sure intended to fix them. One night, as fall settled in, I found Lacey sitting on the old fence line again, just like before. You know, she said, eyes twinkling, if you keep trying this hard, folks might start thinking you've gone soft. I chuckled, leaning against the post beside her. Only for you. She grinned, and this time, she didn't pull away when I kissed her. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't some perfect scripted movie moment. It was better. It was real. You can own half the state. You can have your name stitched onto deeds, signed onto contracts, burned into the side of buildings. But if you don't have someone waiting for you when the sun goes down, none of it means a damn thing. I learned that the hard way, and by God's grace, I learned it in time. The fall turned to winter quicker than anyone expected that year. The wind got sharper, the nights longer. But for the first time in a long while, my world felt warmer. Not because I had money, not because of land, because I wasn't alone. Lacey moved into the ranch house at the edge of the creek. Not the estate, not the big empty mansion with polished floors and hollow halls. She chose the little one-bedroom place I built when I was 19 with my own hands, back when no one believed I'd amount to anything. She said it was the only place that felt like me, and I believed her. We spent the cold months fixing fences, tending cattle, drinking coffee by the fire. I stopped chasing every dollar I could grab, started chasing sunrises instead. I took her on horseback rides through the hills I used to roam alone. She taught me how to laugh without holding back. I taught her how to drive my old pickup, even though she damn near ran it into the fence twice. The world for once slowed down, and I let it. The old folks in town came around eventually. After they saw I wasn't just passing through. After they saw I wasn't going to leave her the way her daddy did, or the way half the folks in her life had. Some still whispered, still eyed me like a wolf in a church, but most gave me a nod. And in a small town like ours, that nod meant everything. One crisp, clear night, the kind where the stars hang low enough to touch, I took her to the same fence line where we built that first fire. Had a bottle of whiskey in my hand, and a ring in my pocket. She sat down cross-legged like she always did, hair loose, face soft in the moonlight. I used to think, I said, voice tight, that a man wasn't worth much unless he left something behind with his name on it. She smiled. Sounds about right for you. I laughed. Yeah, well, I was wrong. She raised an eyebrow. Oh? I nodded. Turns out it ain't the land. It ain't the oil. It ain't the money. I pulled the ring out. Nothing flashy, nothing big. Just a simple silver band with a small turquoise stone set in it. Something my mama would have called good luck. I held it out to her. It's the people who carry your name in their hearts. That's what matters. She stared at me, eyes bright. Maddox Creed, she whispered. Are you asking me? I didn't let her finish. I just said, marry me, Lacey. Not because I can give you half the state, but because you've already given me more than I ever earned. For a moment the world went so still I swear I could hear the river a mile away. Then she smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Yeah, she said, voice thick. I'll marry you, Cowboy. We didn't have a big wedding, no guest lists, no cameras, no high-dollar venue, just a preacher, Gus from the diner, her brother standing by my side, and a handful of folks who mattered. We said our vows under that old oak tree, the same one my mama used to hang laundry on, and when she kissed me, the wind picked up like the world was clapping for us. They still call me Maddox Creed around here, the man who owns half the state, but most days, folks just call me Lacey's husband, and between you and me, I like that title best, because land comes and goes, fortunes rise and fall, but love, real, hard-earned, battle-scarred, stubborn as hell love, that's worth more than any empire. And now when the sun sets over my land, I've got someone waiting at home, and that's all I ever wanted.